American, actually.
Well, it is Domino's. It's a little Italian sounding, I guess.
I got to wear these headphones. Usually I take the headphones off, but I got to wear them if I'm going to record this. Otherwise, I'll get feedback from my speakers. So
No seeing your ears.
yeah.
So
they're really nice ears. I'll tell you.
Brülosophy.com, right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, feedback at Brülosophy. You know what's funny is I say send a feedback at Brülosophy.com in every episode, and 99% of emails, because I manage both of those accounts, 99% go to Marshall at Brülosophy.com. When they come to feedback, I can act like it's somebody else managing it, But when they come to mine, it's like, well, of course that's me.
Right.
Okay, just fair warning. I think we're about to get started, but I think right before I introduce you, I'm going to hit the mute all on everybody just to make sure we don't get a whole bunch of feedback and random people talking. Because inevitably people will come in, and I don't have an option to individually mute you guys. I'm sorry. I just have to mute all. So, Marshall, you'll have to unmute yourself.
Okay, let me see how to do that. It'll give me the option down at the bottom there?
Yeah, it's a microphone.
Okay, cool.
But I'm gonna do that right before right when I'm about to announce you. I'm gonna mute everybody, unmute me, and then you can unmute yourself and talk. And then just everybody who's on this call, you already know, since he's gonna record this, I'll make the announcement again in a few minutes since people will come on late. We kind of want to be really courteous about when we don't, step over him too badly. Otherwise, he's gonna start breaking out his clicker, and we're gonna hear a click click really loudly.
Yeah. So you guys know about the clicker here.
Uh-oh. Am I supposed to bark?
Yeah, it is a dog clicker, actually.
It sounds just like
I got 4 for $7 on Amazon, and they work quite well, actually.
What do you do with the other 3?
I gave one to Cade for the brew lab, and dead serious, my kids got the other 2 because they think they're fun to play with.
Sure, that's fun for you.
Will, one thing you might want to say as people start to join is we'll give a little disclaimer in the episodes where we swear a little bit more. That's usually just brews views. But if people are gonna, I don't care if people want to swear and do all that stuff, but it will mean that we're gonna, that's gonna nix some listeners. Because there are people who listen with their kids in the car and they don't like swearing around their kids, unlike some of us heathens. So just something, if you want to, let people know that this is going to be recorded and will likely be an episode of the Brülosophy podcast.
Good to know.
Yeah.
So if you don't want your coworkers hearing you cussing on a podcast, here you go. Cool.
Coworkers, kids.
After, so we'll get started real quick, guys. 2022 is flying by. We're in the February meeting already, which is awesome. Thanks to everyone who came out last month. Haven hooked us up with Brian Perkey from Lalaman, and he was a great speaker, gave us some really cool info. I don't know if you guys saw, but I believe next month we have somebody, I don't know who he is, Vinny Chalerzo, somebody from Russian River. Super excited about that. We're excited. Like, we want to put people up that we want to listen to. So if y'all have ideas, if y'all have a hookup, let us know. And we want to listen to people that y'all want to listen to too. So just let us know about speakers. Our current speaker, who knows, we don't barely know this guy, but we really want great speakers in the future. We want to hear what you guys want to hear. Hava, did you want to talk about the sticker promo real fast?
I wasn't chasing you out. I was just gonna make something myself to eat and then get out of here. So.
Okay.
Oh, you got to mute everyone, right? Yeah.
Awesome. Okay, cool. Alex, you had something you wanted to ask about real quick.
Yeah, just real quick. For a variety of reasons, we'd like to register as a social club / nonprofit with the IRS. But this might be a little bit complicated since we're almost entirely online with some international members. So if anybody in this call or listening has any experience with this problem, just reach out to me at alex@thebrewclub.com because, yeah, do it soon because we'd like to get the paperwork done by the end of February, preferably. So back to you, Will.
Awesome. Okay, cool. Really exciting stuff going on for the TBC experiment series. As most of you know, we've had several people already get published on the Brülosophy.com website for doing experiments on behalf of the Brew Club. It's a really cool experience. I know Matt Skillstad was getting data today for probably what's going to be this month's article, we're hoping. And then I know there was another member that reached out to me about another experiment that we're getting in the works. And so, guys, it's really cool. If you do an experiment, you get it published, one, which is cool enough. Two, you're going to get entered into kind of a fan favorite contest to see who's going to win a Delta Firm Tank from Delta Brewing System. So that's pretty awesome. So you can get some stainless for your yeast there. And so it's kind of a cool deal. So if any of y'all are interested at it, you can hit me or Alex up on Facebook. Alex at the Brew Club or Will at the brewclub.com. You can email us there. One of us will throw up those emails in the chat just in case you're interested and want to get that going right now. But that would be really awesome if you guys want to do it. And it's a lot of fun to do. You get to kind of experience the process. And like Marshall always says, go test it out for yourself. And it really is kind of hard when you get in that triangle test. So cool stuff. I mentioned earlier, meeting next month is Saturday, March 5th. We're going to hopefully be featuring Vinny Shalurzo with Russian River. Maybe you've heard of Pliny the Elder. I actually got my hands on my first one a couple of weeks ago, and I finally know what the hype is all about a decade too late. But that's pretty awesome. All right, Haven, I'm going to mute everybody real fast just for fun, and then you can unmute and talk about average brews.
Sounds good.
Okay, I think I did it.
All right, I think so too. All right. Average brews, the first survey is done. We made it through. I thought we were going to get about 15 to 20 responses. We actually ended up with 91 responses, which is just wild. That's more exposure than I thought we were going to have with this thing, which is fantastic. I'm glad that people were into giving data for the survey, and we came up with an awesome recipe, or a guideline to recipe, I should say. I won't go through every aspect of the recipe. I know I'm sure everyone can read here. So I did drop the picture in the chat. Havo made a great graphic showing everything. So now we're into creating our recipe and brewing it. So we're going to be able to, I've noticed a few people already going ahead and doing that on Discord and Facebook. I think someone posted today that they brewed their beer, which is great. I mean, we're already doing something with this, which is fantastic to see. We have heard your suggestions on doing a little bit more instead of just, like the old college post on a discussion board and respond to two of your peers kind of stuff. We're going to go beyond that. We're already in looking into different possibly mass entering competitions, doing maybe an informal TBC competition, something like that. We're looking. So if you have any ideas of how you'd like to see this progress in the future, anything more, other than just posting about our beer and discussing it on the groups, if you have other ideas on how we can improve this and go further with our beers, that'd be great. I think Doug brought up sending a bunch of bottles to me and watching me get progressively more drunk throughout the evening, tasting all the Average Brews beers. I'm up for it. If we want to pick a member every quarter and send them a bunch of beers and watch them get drunk on camera, that's cool too. We do have a very, very special opportunity that kind of fell into our lap this quarter. So watch the Facebook group later this week for that. You guys are going to want to brew your beers and have them ready. I'm not going to say anything further, but it's going to be pretty dang cool. So that's pretty much all I got on it. If you have any questions, haven@thebrewclub.com, shoot me a Facebook message. I'm always on the computer, so I'll get back to you as soon as possible, and we can get this thing rolling. And if we need to help you create a recipe too, we'll absolutely do that as well.
That is awesome. Thank you so much, Haven, for laying that out for us. Now that we've got a few minutes of housekeeping taken care of, we're really excited. We have the Brülosopher himself joining us. I think he's going to answer whatever random questions we have, so that's pretty awesome. Just a forewarning, since this may be recorded and may go on a podcast, there may be some swearing and colorful language. So for people listening at home, we want to make sure that, if that's the kind of thing you're not into, you got kids in the car, whatever, there may be some swearing, colorful language that we're not going to be editing everyone here. Also, if you don't want your coworkers to hear you swearing like a sailor on a podcast, this may be also a good time to edit yourselves if you're on the meeting. So without further ado, Marshall Schott, welcome. Thanks for coming over and joining us at the Brew Club.
Yeah, thank you guys so much for having me. Which I understand, it's a Brülosophy-based club. The fact that I'm here, you guys have got some killer stuff going on, and it's awesome to be kind of in the background for once when it comes to this stuff, and to see how you guys are building so much rad stuff with this club.
Awesome. Well, since we just announced Average Brews, we were kind of curious to see. I know you just had a whole podcast about formulating your own recipes, but we were kind of talking about, what really is the best way for you other than posting it on a Facebook Messenger stream for making your own recipes. And again, guys, make sure everybody mutes when they come on, since this is being recorded. So what is kind of your way that you like to go about making recipes other than putting up a big poll on a Facebook group?
I've never actually created a recipe by putting up a poll on a Facebook group, but recipe design is one of those things I think I get asked about an awful lot, which is funny because it's not like I've ever prided myself on being a great recipe designer, but I am all for the idea that simplicity breeds, some of the best stuff oftentimes. And that's the case when it comes to brewing beer. You want to make sure that you're not overdoing anything in particular with the recipe. And I remember I tell this story to new brewers often, that my brother, I have a twin brother. That means we were born on the same day, obviously. And he was getting into home brewing. The Brülosophy thing was up and doing its thing. And he lives out in Buffalo, New York. I'm out here in California, and he wanted to get brewing. And so I hooked him up. I ordered all this stuff for him, sent it out to him. He was able to do his batch sparge process. This was probably 12 years ago. And or 7 years ago now. And he gets everything going. He brews his first beer. I told him keep it very simple just to see if you know how to do it, right? So he does it. He liked the beer. It was like a Simcoe smash beer. And then the next beer he made was he wanted to make some sort of like maple brown ale type of thing. And he sent me the recipe, and it just had 15 different malts in it, 3 different hops, but they were all added at weird times because he read about, bittering flavor and aroma. And I said, cut out like 75% of your malts, make sure it's still brown, do 2 hop additions for a brown ale, and let's see where you go from there. Ended up being a fantastic beer. There was no maple, and I think he bottle conditioned with maple. And so I shot him the calculator for that, but it was awesome. And so again, there's just another kind of indicator to me that the more simple you go, sometimes you can still make very delicious beer. So when it comes to designing recipes, I very much start from a base of, about 80% base malt, whether that's a blend of Munich and Vienna and pale malt and Maris Otter or whatever it might be. But then that 20% I kind of play with, and I might use Munich malt as a specialty malt because of the fact that it is much more characterful than, say, pale malt, right? Or Pilsner malt. And so I use it for that often. And just to keep it simple and to make sure everything lines up. That's one of my favorite things about Brewfather or the other popular calculators that are out there, is that you can kind of see where it falls within that BJCP guideline. The other nice thing is, for people who don't care about sticking to the rules, right, to a specific style, which is great, it's nice to know, okay, it falls within this style, and here's where I'm going to tweak off of. But that's my personality. So I kind of like that. So I'm going to, twist the screwdriver a little bit here, turn the knob a little bit over here, and it may not fit exactly within, say, milk stout, but it's got these different characteristics. I can add some cinnamon, make it something all its own. But I like knowing that if I stick to this, I'm probably going to make a drinkable beer, a passable beer, and then I can start doing the other fun stuff on top of that.
That's awesome. it sounds a little more adventurous. I usually like to go pull the audience of recipes and kind of pull in what I think looks like a good recipe and then tweak from there. So kind of
I do
similar.
that too, actually, Will. Yeah. That's not a foreign thing for me, though I usually will go to friends of mine who have done who I know have made these recipes. Because for me, I'm not a terribly cynical person, but I struggle trusting things that I find on the internet, right? It's just maybe I'm old school, I don't know, but so I'll go to I got a local friend, Sean Wood, the guy just knows how to brew, right? Every beer he makes is phenomenal, no flaws. And so usually if for example, if I'm making a Belgian ale, I'll hit him up. Hey, I've never made a triple. What's your recipe? And then I'll tweak it from there. That's the other thing a lot of people don't pay attention to. Andy and I were recently talking about this, I think on the last episode of the Brülosophy podcast, is that something as simple as bitterness, you would think that, that guy used 25 grams of Magnum at 60 minutes and he got, a nicely bitter beer. But on my system, I might need to use more to get the same level of bitterness for whatever reason, some indescribable reason, right? And so usually when I'm making tweaks to somebody else's recipe, stuff like that, but yeah, relying on established recipes that are going to be good, that's my thing. I just like to, defer to people who I know as opposed to the internet mostly. But
so first of all, if it's on the internet, it must be true. But I too have also noticed the whole definitely bitterness, especially like whenever you guys talk about your bitterness, you need to add more. You're not getting as much hop extraction, alpha isomerization, whatever you want to call it. I've noticed that too in my system as well. It just doesn't seem as bitter. I always have to add a little more. So that's cool.
I wonder if that's like a homebrew thing, like the scale or something, because I've definitely noticed that if I use, for example, there have been a few times I made a, what was it? Deschutes Brewing Mirror Pond Pale Ale. They shared their recipe somewhere. I brewed it, a decade ago. And when I made it, that beer was really good, but it was not nearly as bitter as the actual beer. And I just wonder if it's a matter of scale, right? Like on the 5-gallon batch scale versus a 50 barrel or whatever it is they're brewing up at Deschutes, maybe their isomerization is occurring in some different way. I don't know, but I definitely have to use more hops to achieve the same level of bitterness on my system as other people do.
Yeah, and Will in the chat said that maybe a difference in chilling time, that could be some of it, because again, it takes so much longer for them to chill their wort down. Maybe they're just extracting that many more, that much isomerization of alpha acids. And then Haven asked in the chat, kind of related to this as well, is do you keep your hop utilization listed at 100%, which is the default setting in Brewfather, or do you tweak that?
I always keep it at 100%. And so here's the thing. I went through a whole phase where I didn't, right? I would kind of nut out on, oh man, these hops are 6 months old, so they've degraded by this much. And so now I'm going to just pretend the alpha acid is this much, but and honestly, I don't know why anybody would do that. And I've talked to people up in Yakima who, they grow hops, they study hops, they know this stuff like the back of their hand, who are saying, yeah, there is some degradation, but it's not worth worrying about if you are storing your hops properly. I have a feeling, and I don't know this to be a fact, but I have a feeling that the whole degradation calculation, I think it's what they say, 15% per year in alpha acid or something like that, that it's based on warm stored hops, likely whole cone, that are, probably not even vacuum sealed or anything like that. So, my thing is I just keep it the same and I'll go from there. And I've yet to notice huge differences. I mean, we've done some interesting hop comparisons, for experiments, years apart, and bitterness has never been the thing that we've perceived as being different. So.
Awesome. Just to go for some of the Facebook questions we got earlier, Haven asked, how did Brülosophy go from small experiments in your garage to one of the biggest website podcasts in homebrewing? And then there's another part. Why did you decide to start a website? And when did you decide to bring in contributors? And what does the future hold for you guys? About 3 parts. I'll try to keep you on track if I can.
First off, I didn't realize that I've never viewed us as being one of the biggest out there, but that's because I'm an idiot. So I don't notice that thing. But I'm actually going to start by answering the second question, which was what made me decide to start a website, right? Okay, so I've told this story before. I never really intended to start one, but I had a friend who I was brewing with back in 2010 or so. I'd introduced him to brewing. We were brewing together every weekend, having a great time. And he ended up having to leave town for work. And so I'm stuck here going, all right, well, he was really my only local brewing friend. He was a buddy of mine that I introduced to it. So I need to find another group of folks. So I found the local homebrew club, made some really close friends that I'm still really close with today. But there was something about like just brewing to drink wasn't really satisfying me. And so I had the idea to start doing experiments or start messing around with some ideas that I'd had in my head. And really the first thing that was harvesting yeast from starters. And so what I was doing this, I was showing all my friends and they're like, dude, this is great. That's like the cleanest yeast. It's better than harvesting from, a yeast cake. And so somebody encouraged me to write it up on Homebrew Talk. So I went over and did that. Well, that ended up getting shared on a bunch of different places. And so I started getting all of these, comments that people were saying, dude, you should start a website if you're going to do this kind of stuff. I don't think I want to do that. I don't know how to run a website. I'm an idiot when it comes to all of that kind of stuff. But I did go and kind of save the name Brülosophy over at WordPress.com because I liked the way it sounded. I love philosophy. I'm a psychologist in my normal life, and it just kind of worked together. And then for no reason whatsoever, I built out 2 identical systems in my garage, brewing systems, so that I could start experimenting, thinking that would keep me interested in brewing, and it has. And that was really the genesis of the website. So I had posted some stuff about the yeast harvesting, and then the what people nowadays call the Brülosophy lager fermentation method. But it was right around the same time that I know Mike Tasty McDole, rest in peace, a good friend of Brülosophy, but that he was kind of promoting a similar idea, just based on similar thinking about fermentation and what we know about how that works. But those are really what kind of served to give Brülosophy a name. And then I started doing these experiments, and within about 5 months, I think there was no commitments. It was just a stupid homebrewing blog back then. Within about 5 months, I was getting, people asking me, hey, we love this kind of stuff. Can we contribute as well? People started joining the crew, and here we are today. I mean, it just kind of grew. It was like a snowball. And it just kind of grew into this thing that it is today. And I love it. It's been super fulfilling on a level that, and I don't mean to sound like I'm dissing my profession, but on a level that my real life profession doesn't give me, this does. The social part, being able to be a part of stuff like this, being able to travel, talk to other like-minded people about beer and brewing in the ways that I like to, and so that's really what it was. There was really no impetus other than I'm bored and let's see what happens with this.
So as far as the future and what the future holds for Brülosophy, that gives us a pretty good background. Is there like some things you're definitely planning here in the near future? I know in the past y'all have submitted some samples to different labs to get some more objective analysis. Is there any plan to kind of expand on the perception testing or anything like that?
Well, that's a good question. We had some ideas, nothing set in stone prior to COVID happening, but COVID really put a kink in a lot of stuff, from merchandising to branding to parties that we had planned with sponsors of Brülosophy. We had to press the pause button on all of that stuff. We don't really have plans to go any more into the objective side of that pisses a lot of people off. I understand that, but we really are more about the sensory side, perception. That's I'm a psychologist. That's what I like. I like perception. I like messing around with what people think they know and what they can prove they know. Right. And so that we don't have anything set in stone at this point for further testing on the objective side of things. In terms of the social side of things, we are really hoping that as COVID starts to wane off, we used to talk about it a bit on the podcast, but our partners, Yakima Valley Hops and Haas, John I. Haas, we're really hoping to start being able to move forward with some cool event ideas. That's all I'll say on that. But we've got some ideas that I think people are going to really dig. So
that is awesome, and I think most of us really dig Brülosophy because of the perception testing. Because again, if you can't taste a difference, then does it really matter to you that much? But again, there's always that objective portion that we're always curious about. So I can appreciate that.
Yeah, there's a unfortunate, I think, kind of side effect, if you will, of releasing data on sensory analysis is that people, a small subsect, but there are people out there who will perceive what we're doing as being telling people that they need to brew a different way, or they don't need to do this certain process or whatever it might be. And that is, I feel like I've said it a bazillion times and it doesn't matter. They're going to hear it that way anyways, but we are not trying to tell people how to brew. That is not what we're in the business of doing. We are here to provide interesting, fun stuff for people who are interested in brewing and beer to read, when they don't have anything better to do. And if that happens to influence the way they brew, so be it. We have no control over that. If it influences them and they end up enjoying their brew day more, then you know what? We'll take a little bit of credit for that. That's cool. But this whole idea that we're out here trying to tell people that, mashing for 60 minutes isn't necessary. We've never said that. You can do whatever you want. All we're saying is that people weren't able to distinguish these beers, or they were able to distinguish these beers given these conditions. Make of that what you will, right? And so we are often misperceived, right? But that's okay. That's okay with us.
Man, Marshall, why do you keep telling me how to brew? I don't understand it, man.
Exactly. All you have to do. I mean, we've made a concerted effort to not be defensive online, because that only makes people look more and more like maybe they are guilty of whatever they're being accused of. But just go look at, every week when we share our stuff on Facebook, the Brülosophy Facebook page or whatever, there is a whole diatribe of people who are perceiving what it is that we're actually trying to do. And we just kind of leave it alone and let these people hash it out themselves. I don't know what to make of it. I like to think that I've got a decent grasp of the human condition, but there are some people who really just want others to know, that they don't think what we're doing is right. And so, hey, we'll let you do it. I'm not going to delete your comments. I don't care.
I think there's a really cool psychology component that I would love to dive into with, but I don't think this is the appropriate platform. But I think there's a lot to do with ritual and some of those things, but that's for a different time.
We could do a whole show on that, Will. I'm telling you.
Dude, I'm in for it. Like the whole psychology of perception bias and ritual and all those things, I'm down. But I don't know if that's where we're going to go here. Maybe at the end if we have time. But Edvin Eddie Thor, he was on the Facebook group, and he asked about you or any of the contributors have further experience besides home brewing in the brewing world. He wants to know specifically about working in a brewery, Cicerone, similar kind of levels. And he wants to know about brewers and pros for your articles and interviews. And if we want to start including them into the equation. I know that's another multi-parter, but people got some good questions, man. It's
all good. So I have not ever been paid to be a professional brewer. I have been I've been friends with people who are commercial brewers. I've brewed with them. I've been around while they're brewing beer, all of that. I'm not sure what, how getting paid to do that would make you any better of a brewer. But I actually, some of the best beers I've ever had in my life have come from home brewers. So I tend to kind of sway on that side of things more than I do this idea that, just because you're a commercial brewer. I've had some of the worst beers from commercial breweries. So I think most of us can probably relate with that, right? You go to a brewery, you're really excited to have a beer, and it ends up tasting like chlorine water. But no, so I am not a professional brewer. I'm a professional podcaster, if you will. That's what somebody else told me, that you can't, they said, don't shy away from saying you're a professional podcaster, because that's what a podcaster does. Right. And so, okay, fine. I'll own that. Cade Job, in fact, he is the host of the Brew Lab, but he's also a contributor for Brülosophy. He does the experiments. He does all of that. He is currently at Oregon State University in their food and science program for the brewing industry stuff. And his hopes are to be a professor of the brewing sciences when he finishes up. He was recently accepted by Tom Shellhammer's group up there. If you guys don't know Tom Shellhammer, he's very well known in hop research, huge name in hop research, wonderful person. He also, Cade also worked at Blue Owl as a commercial brewery, so he's got that as well down in Austin, Texas, before he moved up to Oregon. Let's see. Andy Carter is the president of the California Homebrewers Association, so he is not a professional brewer, but he has his he's knee deep in the homebrewing world. We'll put it that way, and he is very close. Similar to me, he's very close to all of his local commercial breweries down there in Southern California where he lives and operates. Let's see here. There's so many, it would be hard for me to list it all off because I've been drinking for one, but also there's just too much stuff to talk about. I think most of us understand that just because you're a commercial brewer, one, doesn't make you a better brewer. Two, doesn't make you a better taster. That's one of the weird arguments that I'll hear from people often is, well, how do you know, your tasters just suck? Well, you are those tasters. I mean, are you saying that you're better than these people? Because that's not how I operate. I tend to presume that most people have palates. And if you have a palate, then you are a participant. You're a potential participant. So I guess that's kind of where I'm at. I don't mean to get too defensive, but we've got people who are kind of plugged into the commercial world. We've got people who have been homebrewing for decade plus. So
I always compared like homebrew to commercial brew as kind of this, like, it's like when you smoke a brisket at home versus the guy that's smoking 100 of them in a day. Like if it's your baby and you're babysitting it for your 15 hours, like you're going to make sure that it turns out the best that it can be versus if you're making like 100 of them in a day, you're like, okay, we just got to get these through the assembly line. We got to make a buck. And so I kind of always liked that analogy. But I'm also from Texas and I eat a lot of brisket. So
we don't eat very much brisket here. We're here in Fresno. Central Valley is all about tri-tip. And man, I'll tell you, and I hear people smoke tri-tip like brisket, but it doesn't come out nearly as good. So,
well, it's you definitely can't overcook your tri-tip. I've cooked one or two, and you don't want to overcook it. That's for sure.
No, that's a sin. Yes.
So now that we're talking about food, that kind of leads into Will Allward's question, which is, what is your go-to pizza on pizza making night or pizza ordering night if you don't make a lot of pizza?
Oh man. Well, first off, I make my own dough, and I've actually gotten emails from people who are like, what dough do you go with? What dough style? Neapolitan. It's simple. It's easy. It's clean. You're looking at just flour, and I tend to go for about 70% hydration, give or take, depending on how I'm feeling that day. But all you're using is flour. And I've actually found, this sounds really hoity-toity, but I found that a blend of bread flour, a 50-50 blend of bread flour and all-purpose flour really does. I like the bite that I get out of that. The way that I make pizza may be different for others, but yeah, you're looking at flour, salt, and water, and then yeast, and that's it. And it's super simple. And everybody in my household likes that the best so far. And we've done, Sicilian, American style, all these different styles of dough. So that is where I go with for the dough side. We always start with just a cheese pizza as an appetizer, and I'll put garlic on there and a little bit of maybe like Italian seasoning, and that's it. And some olive oil. Bring it out. The kids who don't like all the toppings will pig out on 3/4 of it, and the rest of us will just have little nibbles while we're waiting on the other pizzas. So here's the thing. I love pineapple on pizza, and I know that is like a sinful thing for a lot of people out there. So we always make a Hawaiian pizza. Half of it I'll do with onion and jalapenos. The other half is just cheese, Canadian bacon, and pineapple. Or I actually prefer the chopped up. You can go to the store and buy chopped up tiny little cubes of ham, which I like better than Canadian bacon. And that's what we'll use often on that. But the one pizza that my family forces me to make every time we do pizza night is barbecue chicken pizza with Sweet Baby Ray's instead of red sauce as the sauce on it. And it is so good. And we stack it up. I smoke up some chicken breasts. Earlier in the day, I let them cool off in the fridge, chop it up into small little chunks, put that on there with some green onion, cheese. Oh, to die for. Yeah.
I might be emailing Marshall at Brülosophy.com here in about 5 minutes to exchange pizza dough recipes here. That sounds pretty awesome. If I hadn't just eaten, I would be salivating right now. So I'm sorry to those of you who haven't eaten yet. So another one from the Facebook group was Doug Walker. In a recent episode, you mentioned that even though your experiments showed non-significant results, you have no plans to change your process. So I think he's saying that even though you get some things that are non-significant that should potentially be significant, right? According to objective data, why aren't you trying to change your process? So with that in mind, what are some of the processes that you will continue to do, even though your experiments have indicated it's not going to have an impact on what some of the processes? Let me make sure I'm reading this right. Even though some of your processes and experiments have shown it would have an impact. So
it would have an impact.
So you don't even though your experiments have shown that it would have an impact. So I think part of this is processes, because I think I know you guys do several that don't get significant, even though there probably is an objective difference to some degree. And so I guess he's wondering if y'all are going to change some of your processes in order to look at, have more conclusive or maybe different data. If Doug's on here, he can clarify in the chat as well.
Well, how about that? Oh, I hear you, Doug. Go for it.
So specifically, what are some things you will keep doing, even though your research says, your data points say doesn't matter? And what are the things that you won't start doing, even though your data points say it would make a difference?
Oh, there we go. Okay. Things that I'll keep doing, even though the data says it doesn't matter, is, I think a perfect example of that is mash length, right? The duration of your mash. And the main reason is that while it doesn't matter, I put that in quotes. What we found is up until about 30 minutes of a mash rest, you will get progressively more extraction, right? We know that. After about 30 minutes, you're not getting much more, maybe 2 or 3% more efficiency. Not worth worrying about. But there's a huge benefit to a 60-minute mash, because it allows you to prep everything else in your brew day, measure out your hops, start warming up your strike water if you do a sparge, all of that stuff. And it just makes it less hectic. If any of you have ever done a genuine short and shoddy brew day, 2 hours, you imagine all the stuff you have to get done. I'm lucky enough to have a 240 volt setup. Electric setup, but 2 hours is usually right about where I'm done and putting the fermentation vessel in the chamber, or pitching my yeast. I'm telling you, it's hectic. You're moving around the entire time. If you were to extend your mash rest to an hour, extend your boil to an hour, chill, do all that stuff, you're looking at a 4 to 5 hour brew day. I'm doing it in 2 hours. It's hectic. So doing a 60-minute mash is something that when I'm not brewing for short and shoddy is something I would still do, because it just slows the brew day down a little bit. For me, the way I look at it is, well, I'll just start mashing, do all of this stuff. And if I come back and it's only been 54 minutes, I'm not going to wait those extra 6 minutes, which is what a lot of people do. I got to wait a full hour, because if you don't, that's not right. That's not what the recipe says. That's really more how I view the ones that are non-significant. Now, for the ones that have been significant that I'll keep doing anyways, is that what you're asking?
Yes.
Okay. So we've shown with certain yeast strains, and I forget the delineation here, but you got your Froberg and your Scott lager yeast strains. And some of them are more robust, like the Weihenstephan 3470 or Imperial Yeast Global. You can ferment that at 70 degrees and it's going to taste the same as if you fermented it at 50. There are people out there who are going to scoff at that, who are going to say there's obviously something we're doing wrong, but we have done this multiple times and you just can't taste a difference. It's so robust. It's a good, clean fermenter. And in the world of biology, that's not a huge difference in temperature, really. Now, we've also shown that other types of lager yeasts, L17 Harvest, my favorite, there is a perceptible difference. There seems to be this perceptible difference than if you ferment it at 50 degrees versus 66 degrees or so Fahrenheit. I actually prefer the 66 degree Fahrenheit beer. It tastes more lagery to me. And my hypothesis on this is that if you ferment it warm, it's actually because we know that warmer, higher temperatures is correlated with quicker chemical reactions, that you are actually getting the lagering effect, which people, think happens when you just cold condition, that's all occurring much quicker as you ferment it, as opposed to fermenting it cold and then just reducing the temperature from there. All of that stuff's going to take much longer purely because of temperature. So I actually prefer, for example, L17 Harvest fermented at 66 more than I do fermented at 50 degrees and lagered for 4 weeks. First off, I don't have to wait 4 weeks to drink it. Secondly, it's clear, crisp, tastes good. It meets all of my demands, right? And so that's one of those things that I'll just keep doing, even though there has been a significant difference. And that's, I don't know if what exactly explains what that is, but there's a lot of people out there who've been using Harvest, or another one is Que Bueno, which is the Mexican lager yeast, Grupo Modelo, who are saying, we actually like this fermented warm. It's better fermented warm. It's crisper, it's cleaner, which, that doesn't make sense given the 1990s version of what you're supposed to do with lager yeast.
I had a follow-up question on that. Marshall, why the heck is it so hard to find L17 Harvest?
Oh, yeah. So I have been pressing our good friends, Imperial Yeast. They are open to sending this stuff wherever they can, but they've got to have local homebrew shops that are open to paying for it. And the reality is, people have connections. Our local shop here in town is a White Labs shop. And so I can't drive down there and get Imperial because they have their contract with White Labs. People don't realize, and I get it. You'd think, well, why don't you just order some Imperial? When a homebrew shop opens up, they get a whole clientele that comes in, and then they learn to expect what's going to be there. So you guys are all homebrewers. You know how this goes. You made a fantastic IPA using WLP 001 20 years ago. For the last 20 years, you've been using WLP 001, right? I got to use it because that's what made this beer good. Now, all of a sudden, new kid on the block, Imperial Yeast, comes in and is saying, hey, check it out. We offer more cells. We have, this great yeast. That homebrew shop owner is going, do I want to sacrifice people's fear that it's not going to be as good, right? I honestly think that's what it is. And so it's just this slow evolution. The nice thing is Imperial Yeast is growing like crazy right now. So I think you're going to start to see it in more and more local homebrew shops. It's just a matter of time. But one thing that you can do is order online. Go to greatfermentations.com or morebeer.com. Both of those seem to have, I think Northern Brewer also does, seem to have a really good selection of Imperial Yeast.
And I'll go and plug it. If you go to the Brülosophy website first, they do get a small kickback if you go to those links from there. And Marshall didn't have to plug it. I'll plug it for him.
Thank you, Will.
A way to help you guys out. So that's awesome. Yeah. And as far as the short and shoddy, I really encourage people to do that because it does tell you what you can get away with on your brew day. I mean, I've submitted warm fermented with the Feinstefaner strain at a 45-minute mash and scored in the high 30s with a Czech amber lager. So you can make good beer in those methods. So definitely check all that out and try it for yourself before you start passing judgment on what needs to happen or doesn't need to happen.
Well, just to tag on to that, I scored a 42 in the 2016 NHC, I believe, for a Vienna lager that was fermented at 66 degrees. So put that together, right? And that's the thing, people ask, there was that question earlier about, people's, I'm presuming that they were asking about the palates or the tasting prowess of the people that we administer these tests to. We ran a full comparison basically of our first 33 experiments, and we broke it down by experience level. And by that, we just mean, are they a BJCP judge? Are they, your typical Miller Lite drinker? Are they, have they been involved in homebrewing for a long time, whatever it is? There was no significant differences in their abilities to distinguish these beers. So this idea that, well, if you were to serve a beer mashed at 148 versus one mashed at 60 to a trained, I don't even know what that means, but to a trained panel of tasters, they'd probably get it right. Whereas those plebes who just drink beer on the weekends, they're never going to. Well, first off, my question is, what do you consider yourself to be? Do you on? Because if everybody who is criticized the way that we collect data and who we collect data from, if all of them are seriously as good as they seem to think they are, then we'd be living in a world of some hyper good tasters, right? But the reality is, most of the people that we serve these experiments to, or the Hop Chronicles, or the Short and Shoddy, whatever it might be, they all think they're pretty damn good tasters. We all do. It's just a normal human thing. And I get the knee-jerk reaction to think, but I know, because I read in How to Brew, which we love John Palmer, by the way, but I read in there that if you don't do this, then this will happen, or if you do this, this will happen. So you're wrong on this, and I need to justify my belief in some way. It just doesn't work that way,
Well, what's great is that we had John on, and he talked about water. And so John Palmer's talking about water and pH and how important it is. And he's like, well, in spite of Brülosophy coming up with results to the contrary, this is what we know.
Yeah, he's a good friend. John has been to my house with his son, and but I think all of us kind of in this homebrewing, with this weird homebrewing circle where we all communicate, I think all of us have this understanding that people don't recognize, right? There's no hate. No one's calling anybody out. We're all doing our own thing because we love this. And to be honest, John and I have talked about it. Everything we do is to keep homebrewing this rad thing that it is. It's not to prove anything. It's not to make anybody look better or worse than another person. It really is because we love brewing beer. That's it.
No, he was an awesome guest to have. And so we're very thankful for having him on, that's for sure. But it was a great comment that totally played in there. I want to give you enough time to answer this, and then we have a few other questions in the chat. But from Instagram, we had Cascade Brewer on Instagram. He asked, if not taboo, he wanted to know about how much money does Brülosophy actually make? Based on Reddit, you guys are swimming in ad revenue. Given that all team members seem to have full-time jobs, and I suspect it's somewhere between enough to pay for my ingredients and enough to purchase a Ferrari. So where's the Ferrari, Marshall?
I believe he said enough to purchase a second Ferrari, right? Is that well, none of us have Ferraris, I'll tell you that. It's a good question, and I was always raised to not talk about two things: politics and finances. You just don't talk about that. I've stuck to that. If you follow us on Facebook, we've never gotten involved in all the political crap that's going on out there. In the same way, I don't like to talk about finances, but I get the concern. Reddit loves to whine about people making money off of working. I don't know why, but they do. And so I'm not going to give any specific numbers because it's constantly changing. But I would say that we definitely fall somewhere on that spectrum that this person gave. We fall a little bit closer to the not making much at all than we do the second Ferrari. And that's just because this is a very small niche market. Anybody who thinks that somebody in homebrewing, whether it be Gordon Strong or John Palmer or me, or Mike Tonsmeyer, the mad fermentationist, there's a reason he started a brewery, right? You don't do that if you're making millions of dollars off of your popular blog. It just doesn't make sense. There's nobody making millions off of this. I don't know how else to put that. Do we profit off of what we do? That is the incentive, part of the incentive that keeps us going. Yes. Is anybody buying Ferraris with the money they make off of homebrewing? Absolutely not. Not even close. I'll tell you that. We enjoy what we do. The fact that we get a little bit of sprinkling on the top of money to pay for beer when we go out with our friends, then yeah, if that bothers you, I don't know what to say. It's not much though. I'll tell you that. And there are times where, all of us, let's see, I believe all of us in the Brülosophy crew right now are married. Most of us have kids. Every single one of us has a real career. And the fact that none of us have been able to stop doing what we normally do in real life should be enough to prove that it's not like this is a millionaire maker by any means whatsoever.
So what I'm hearing is that you're home brewers with benefits. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah, very, very limited benefits. Yeah. Now I will say, if for anybody to, when you go out and you brew a batch of beer, you're doing it because it's your hobby. Brülosophy has moved past the hobby stage and it's become a business. There's no denying that. For us to fake that would be disingenuous, I think. So every time one of the contributors works their tail off to brew 2 batches of beer side by side, something 99% of brewers would never want to do, just ask the brew club, right? You do that. And then after spending all that time brewing 2 batches of beer, now you got to go out and convince people to do a triangle test. And which, thank you. See, daughter bringing me a beer. That's the way it should work. It's a pain in the butt, and yet they go and do it. So yes, they get compensated. It is not a lot. I'm not going to talk numbers, but I'm telling you, you'd probably laugh if you heard what they get paid for each article. So I don't know how else to put it. I'm not trying to like minimize what we're doing. That's a part of the reason I don't like talking about finances. We love this because we love brewing. It's almost embarrassing to talk about how much money isn't made in doing this.
Well, I will say, as someone that has written an article now on your website and it's been published, and I didn't get paid a dime for it, like, it is a lot of work. And to want to do not 1, but 2 of those in a month to try to get content for the website, that is a lot of work. And you would hope there is something there for you because, again, you're making all this beer and then you're giving most of it away. And it may not even be something you want to drink because it's just trying to prove a variable. So that's
well, and I feel like I appreciate you saying that, Will, because I remember you emailing me and being like, this is way more than I thought it would be. So then imagine doing all of that work and feeling pretty confident that I think more than most brewers, we are neurotic about, isolating the variable, doing the best that we can to keep extraneous variables out of this whole thing, out of the equation. And then you go online and people are just shitting on you the whole time. Like, it's like you now, not only do you have to deal with brewing 2 batches, collecting all the data, writing the article, dealing with my dumbass, editing your article, but now you have to deal with all of these people out there questioning what you did, which is fine, but it's a pain in the butt,
Well, I do have a little pride that I brewed back-to-back batches and it came back non-significant. I was a little happy about that because that
you are a very consistent brewer, Will. Yes, I'll give you that.
For that one time.
Yeah.
So now on to a really hard-hitting question. Since we went from money to, I think Will wants to know, is eating a banana split or being able to do the splits more important to you?
Oh, hands down being able to do the splits, which I cannot do, but my daughter can. My youngest daughter she came out a pretzel and she has not changed since. I don't know what's up with her, but she's like Jim Carrey, when he like pulls his cheek. He's got so she's got the gift of flexibility, which I don't have. So that's my answer. Being able to make yourself a pretzel, I suppose.
I think I love that answer because you followed up immediately with, "Well, I can't do it, but I would totally love to do that." So
I wish I could. I was in karate for 2 months, 2 of the worst months of my life, actually. But I was also 8 years old, I think. And one of the things that our sensei kept telling us was by the end of your time here, you'll be able to do the splits. I was always like 8 inches off the ground max or minimum, so.
Hava wants to know what you were drinking.
Right now?
Yes.
So I've had 2 beers. I just poured my wonderful 12-year-old daughter, Hazel, just brought me a second beer. But the first beer that I started out with is actually Sir Lancelot, the flagship IPA from House of Pendragon Brewing Company, who's 1 block away from me. Their tap room is, and it's absolutely delicious. So that's Lancelot. That is a 7%, classic West Coast IPA, clear, delicious. One of my go-tos. But right now, what I just poured was one of the newer Firestone Walker beers called Hopnosis IPA. And it is absolutely delicious. 6.7%. Again, really classic West Coast IPA. It's got a little bit of haze to it. You can kind of see, but it's mostly clear. And has a lot of those, classic kind of piney, citrusy flavors to it. So that's what I'm drinking on. Now, I will say prior to starting this, I had a triple IPA and a Hopnosis as well with some friends, Tim and Paul, actually. Paul, who does the Hop Chronicles.
That's awesome. Paul seems like a pretty cool guy. So
He's a dork. Don't. No, he's not. Yeah, no, I love him.
dude.
He's like a
Okay,
brother.
I'm an engineer who's into beer, and I follow a brewing science podcast. So anyways, pot in the kettle, man.
You know, he's a water guy though. That's the nice thing. That's actually one of the ways that we got really close is that he works with our local water guy. And Paul was going to House of Pendragon. This had to have been, God, 9 years ago now, was going there. And Brad Gaines, who is now the head brewer at Crow and Wolf, was a server at Pendragon. This is small town stuff, right? And he texted me one day. He's like, there's this guy drinking beer at the bar. You're going to love him. And I was like, that's weird. Why are you texting me this? And he's like, dude, you got to trust me. Come in here as soon as you get home. So I bounce over there and I meet Paul. And that was like 7, 8, maybe 9 years ago. And here we are. He's over at my house all the time. He's like our third or fourth child, really. We feed him dinner 90% of the time.
That's awesome. So speaking of Paul, is there any like future in like a I know you mentioned they might be truncated, but like Hop Chronicles kind of podcast, or maybe double downing and doing 2 hops in the same hour?
Is there a possibility of that? Yes. I'll be honest. My biggest concern with that is that the shows would probably be a bit shorter. I wouldn't want to put 2 hop varieties together. I would want to just focus on one. And I kind of like the format that we currently have, which is kind of your intro section or segment, and then the second one where you talk specifically about the variable, and then the third segment where you talk about what you found, right? What we found in that variable. So for the Hop Chronicles podcast, it would have to be, or for that series, it would not be its own podcast. It would have to be talking just specifically about the hop in that second segment and what the industry says you're going to perceive. And then also maybe like, oil concentrations and stuff like that. And then in that third segment would be talking about the results that we got from the Hop Chronicles. I actually think it would work. It's just a matter of Paul travels for his real job. He's a water engineer guy. And he's here 3 days per week, and that's it. So it would be a matter of like, we have to nail down that at this time on this day, every week, we're going to sit down and record. And that's just been difficult so far.
Well, and it's such a cool idea because there's so many different hops out there. They're literally coming out with new ones every year, all the time. And so I think a lot of us would find that really interesting to hear that info about new hops, especially.
Well, I agree. And that's a big part of the motivation for us to get this going. Again, I feel, and I hate to blame everything on COVID, but with COVID, it's just been this thing where it's like, let's just maintain. Let's make sure we don't lose anything. Let's just maintain. We are good friends with James Spencer, Steve Wilkes from Basic Brewing Radio. They have a wonderful hop series. I'm not sure if they're still doing it, but I think they go over like 3 hop varieties per episode when they do it, and they're all single hop brewed beers, kind of like the Hop Chronicles, and they're giving a lot more of a subjective, their subjective perceptions of this beer. But if that's what you're wanting, I can't promote and encourage people to listen to Basic Brewing Radio more. They're awesome people.
Well, I know we're trying to honor your time. I'm going through the chat, and I found another question here from Nate. I'm going to see if I can do it justice. It's kind of a long one, so hang with me. But he says that he knows you have a long list of experiments that have to be done incrementally, meaning you start at a spot and then you have to go to the next test and the next test. To determine whether ingredient or method makes a difference at all, and then determine the magnitude of the differences that are perceptible. Have you considered having individual contributors take an experimental thread all the way through back to back to back to back and reporting all of that at once?
I am not sure I understand that question.
I think it is. So what was the recent one? It was like peat smoked malt. And so you start out with a baseline. And so if you just had that one contributor do the first one and then the second one, and instead of waiting maybe months in between doing these experiments, just making sure they're doing like week after week after week after week. I think I'm meaning that right. Please correct me if I'm wrong.
So if that's what you're asking, you will notice that this is kind of an aside, but you will notice that we did 3 or maybe even 4 cold side oxidation articles in a row. We had a Brülosophy experiment that was cold side oxidation, a TBC, a brew club experiment that was cold side oxidation, and the article that drops this Monday, which I know is after the fact, but is a cold side oxidation experiment. And so usually, and this has way more to do with the content creator side of my thinking than it does with the brewing side. We try to break things up to keep people interested, because you start to see the same thing, you get bored, and you got to think about that kind of stuff. So I guess my answer to that is no. We have not really thought about doing iterative things from week to week to week to week, because of the fact that I think, one, the brewer would get bored, the contributor would probably get bored with it, but I think most readers would probably be like, all right, are we going to move on to something else at some point? And so that really is kind of our reasoning for breaking things up as much as we do. Now, there have been times where we've had a contributor do, say, I believe it was about 5 years ago, I did one of the first cold side oxidation tests. But my initial assumption was that the way that I was kegging back then, which was by running a tube down to the bottom of my keg with the open top and filling from the bottom up, that was low oxidation. Well, we've since realized that that's not the case at all. But I did that, and then I stored those kegs, and I put them away for 4 weeks or whatever it was, and then we recollected data. There are times where we do that kind of stuff, where it's the same batch of beer, and we want to retest it after time or whatever. But again, you got that's all planned out, and you can't publish that stuff 2 weeks in a row. And I think, maybe I'm wrong, but I think for the most part, breeders would probably get kind of bored with that if it was the same stuff focused on week after week.
So I know we've taken up an hour of your time. I don't know how much more time you have to spend with us. Are you up for one more question, 2 more questions?
Yeah, let's do 2 more questions. That'd be perfect.
Okay, cool. So this is a shameless plug for the Brew Club, but here you are in a Brew Club chat. But where do you see Brew Club as we're trying to duplicate some of these experiments? Some of them are doing things that Brülosophy, I don't know, for whatever reason, isn't doing at the present. Where do you see Brew Club experiments fitting into this whole Brülosophy kind of
everything we're up to? I'll tell you that the people who are out there. I guess I should preface it with this. The Brew Club Experiment Series, that is something that we're very, very proud of. We love the fact that there are people out there who want to repeat experiments that we've done and then have them published. And we're so happy to publish that on the website. One, it gives us something to publish, and that, which is always awesome. You ask any content creator, you want stuff to publish. But the coolest part is that you've got these people who are dedicated to doing it. Matt Skillstat, Cade Job used to be a Brew Club member. I mean, he still is a Brew Club member, but that's how I discovered who this guy is, and we met, and he's now a contributor at Brülosophy. The fact that there are people out there who want to repeat stuff that we've done with as much controls as they can in their homebrewing, their homebrewing garage or whatever it might be, I think is amazing. The primary purpose, the way that I see it, at least, the primary role that the Brew Club serves in terms of repeating experiments is to replicate. One of the biggest things in science is, you found this once, but will that happen again if you were to repeat the experiment? We look to the Brew Club and we say, hey, you guys do it again. See, we're going to do it at some point, but we want to see what happens when, people who aren't perceived as being, these home brewers who are hyper controlled and we do things the way that we do. We want regular, quote unquote, regular home brewers to repeat these experiments. And so to me, that is such an important aspect of what we're doing, because that is science, right? Is doing it over and over again. And the more that we see, you cannot say, and again, till I'm blue in the face, I've said this, one experiment result does not a principle make. That is the truth. If you read one of our results and you're like, that means I don't / or do, right, have to do this, then you're taking what we're doing the wrong way. It just means, that's interesting that they didn't seem to find significance there, or that they did here. Maybe you want to apply it. Thankfully, we're not in the field of cancer, right? This is just beer. So it's not like you're going to ruin a batch. It's just beer. So the beauty of the role that the Brew Club plays is that they are replicating these experiments, and that is, to me, that is so awesome. There aren't many people out there who are willing to invest, at least that I've come across, are willing to invest the time, the energy, and the money, right, in brewing 2 batches of beer to see if there's a difference based on one small little variable.
Well, and I'm happy that we can help you repeat some processes, get you some more data, because I do think that is valuable. If you do value science, you value repeatability, and it does give you a lot more validation if you're able to repeat results than if you're not able to. And so I'm going to mispronounce this name, but I believe it's Kai Eric. And he asked, probably the most popular question you get asked probably is, what results have impacted your brewing choices the most? And I dare you to expand on something other than water.
Well, that's what I was going to say. So without question, I will expand on more, but without question, I don't actually think that there's been a variable that we've tested that I've had such a strong opinion about as water. I was fully convinced about 6 years ago. I was fully convinced that, what you read from all of the big names in brewing, Gordon Strong, Jamil Zainashev, John Palmer, they're all saying, if you have good water, brew with it. It doesn't matter, right? I read what I perceived from that was, you're not going to taste a difference as long as you don't have chlorine or chloramine in your water. Well, lo and behold, we've done multiple experiments that show even small differences in chlorides, sulfate levels, mineral levels in general will produce a perceptible difference. That has changed the way that I view brewing beer and the adjusting your water chemistry. Absolutely an important thing for me. Let's see if I go away from that. All you have to do is look at the Short and Shoddy series to see, my answer to that. I've made some of the best beers of my life. Dead serious. Go look at the American wheat beer, Short and Shoddy. That was one of the best beers I've ever made, and it was made in under 2 hours. Abbreviated mash, abbreviated boil, hop additions in the kettle happening at weird times, pitching warm, fermenting with a lager yeast at ale temperatures. All of that stuff. Those are things where I no longer hang my hat on, being the proud home brewer who gets to tell you what you're doing wrong. No, now I'm looking back and going, whoa, if your beer is screwed up, it's probably one of two things: your water chemistry, which, goes back to the first question. But also it could be that you have a contamination. And those are the two things I look at every time I taste a bad beer. The first kind of thought that I go to is either your water chemistry is bad, which usually means that I'm tasting chlorophenols, which is, an issue with chlorine and chloramine, or you got a contamination. Otherwise, most beers are at least drinkable, right? And so I don't know how close to an answer that is, but yeah, so it'd probably be, mash length, fermentation temperature when using lager yeasts, and pitching temp. And I haven't pitched a starter. I mean, I'm lucky enough to have access to fresh imperial yeast, but I haven't pitched a starter in probably 4 years at this point.
I would say first, to piggyback on your water comment, like for me personally, when I hear John Palmer say, if your water is good enough to drink, it's good enough to brew with, I think for beginners, that's kind of good because, again, you're not going to be jumping into water chemistry in your first brew. That's pretty over your head. So when you're reading how to brew, that seems like one of those really high-end concepts that I think at the end of the journey, like that is the thing that makes your beer amazing.
I have a feeling that when John was writing how to brew, and when Gordon, is talking to homebrewers, that there's this. I've not asked them about this, but that there's this kind of tendency to couch it in this. That these people that you're talking to are going to be new brewers. And I get that because a lot of the people who reach out to me, it's kind of funny, actually. I'll forward the emails that I get to the whole crew. And it's only because I love that the first line is always, I've been brewing for fill in however many months that's less than a year, right? I've been brewing for 4 months and, I want to make, I get daily, I get questions like this. And I understand that there's a reason that these people are writing the way that they are to new brewers. And if that's the case, then yes, if you have water that tastes good, you can brew with it. But if you want to make a West Coast IPA that's crisp, that has all of those characteristics that you get from, say, Firestone Walker Union Jack or Pliny the Elder or something like that, then you're going to have to consider, I did not believe this before, and this is my answer to that question. You're going to have to mess around with your water. I promise you. Because if you go high chloride, I guarantee you're going to be drinking something that tastes warm in your mouth, has much more malt character. And I don't, it's like, we can push the water stuff as much. The harder we push, the more people push back. So I try not to go overboard on it. Water chemistry matters. I have fully changed my mind on that. That is the biggest change that I've made in my brewing.
I think John Palmer 100% agrees with you, though, because he has a whole book written on the subject called Water, of all things. He has his own, you can go download his app. I'm not trying to push John Palmer stuff, guys, but you can go
We love Palmer. Push it. Yeah.
You can download his app about water chemistry. So obviously he believes that it makes a difference. Otherwise, he wouldn't have published a whole book about it. But I do have to agree, like probably beginners, yeah, couch it. But as soon as you, thanks for the sign, Alex, showing the John Palmer book.
I've got mine right next to me as well. Yeah.
But once you get once you get to the point where you really want to make a great West Coast IPA or great hazy IPA, whatever you're going for, 100% water matters so much.
I think, to be honest with you, I feel like there are certain styles that have been defined by the water that those original brewers of that style had available to them. You look at Guinness. I mean, we all know that they had a specific style of water that made that beer what it is today. Now, yeah, they sour beer and add it back in and do all that. But hazy IPA versus West Coast IPA, one of the biggest differences there. Now, again, we're not trying to minimize the fact that they do dry hopping differently or whatever, or use different yeast. But one of the biggest differences is the water chemistry. And if you were to go and make a West Coast IPA and split that batch, and in one of them you did high chloride to sulfate, and the other one you did high sulfate to chloride, you will taste a difference. I promise you. We've done it. And it's wild. And it actually makes the beer look different as well. I did an experiment probably 4 or 5 years ago where all I did, it was the same exact beer, 10-gallon batch. All I did was split them into kegs, and then I added some gypsum to one and some calcium chloride to the other one. And the whole idea was get them to about the same levels, right? So about the same ppm of sulfate as I did the same ppm of chloride. Those beers were drastically different, and they look different. That's wild to me. Just because this tiny little amount of mineral that you're adding, these salts that you're adding to the beer, it's just crazy.
It's like less than 10 grams that you're messing with between the chloride and sulfate, and it
way
makes
less. Way less. We're talking I think it was 3 or 4 grams, max, in a 5-gallon batch of beer. And you're looking and you're going, wow, not only do they look different, but they taste phenomenally different. And that's one of the things, we stand on the shoulders of giants, right? That's the whole idea, is that we are lucky enough in the day and age that we're in to have had people who came way before us, who are no longer with us, but who documented what they were finding, the observations they were making. And they're saying, oh yeah, that's where we got the idea that if you have high chloride, you're going to get more malt character, a rounded malt character, a warm biscuity thing, if that's what you're looking for. Whereas if you go high sulfate, you're going to get that emphasized hop character, that sharpness. That has panned out to be true so far in what we've been testing. And I love that. You've got this subjective reports of what people are reporting from hundreds of years ago all the way through to today, where we're actually testing it out, and it's validating those ideas. I love it. That's so cool to me.
And it sounds like a great way for the Brew Club to put a few more experiments out there and keep validating those results, guys. So if y'all want to get on that, feel free to do it.
Amen. Amen to that.
Well, man, we really appreciate your time. We appreciate you coming to hang out with us. We really have enjoyed it. For all the things you hated about this, please email feedback@brülosophy.com. For all the things you liked about this, you can message me on Facebook. But thank you so much, Marshall. You're awesome, man. We appreciate it. You obviously have inspired a lot of people here in this group. And And so we really do appreciate you coming on and chatting with us.
Yeah, I love what you guys are doing with this. As you know, the guy behind Brülosophy and the fact that you guys are the Brew Club, I think is so amazing that you guys have taken this and made of it what you have. And I look forward to seeing where it goes in the future.
Thanks, man. We really appreciate you. I think Marshall's got a date to get to or something. You got a hot date, right?
Her name's Laura. She's my wife, and yes, I do. Yeah.
Hey, that's the best kind of date, is a hot date with your wife. So
That's right.
So we appreciate you, brother. Guys, if y'all want to hang out, I know Marshall's got to get, but we appreciate you, brother.
Yeah. Cheers, guys. Thanks for having me.
Yep. Cheers.
Thank you.
Cheers.
So quick
All right,
shout
later,
out to
guys.
anyone that's staying on here. The water adjustment app is Brewing Water Adjustments by Palmer. It quickly replaced Brew and Water for me. I did one batch on it, and it is so easy. It is so fantastic to work with. Brew and Water is kind of a pain in the butt until you get the hang of it. That app is wonderful. So I've completely ditched Brew and Water once I picked that up.
On that note, Grainfather now does water chemistry. So if you're brewing on a Grainfather, you can put your water chemistry straight in there, and it pulls it right into your recipe and brews off it.
Oh, I didn't know that.
I use the Brewfather app just basically. I kind of switched to Brewfather based on the fact that they still had water chemistry integrated into it. I switched from Beersmith to that, but that's just, and I did it before Brülosophy ever got sponsored by them or started pushing, so that I was way cooler than them before them. On one thing.
I haven't tried the Brewfather stuff yet. I'll be curious to compare it.
Well, guys, I have about this much beer left, so I'm happy to drink. I switched over to a Deschutes Black Butte Imperial Porter. Somewhere in the middle of that whole podcast, from wine to there. We'll see how I'm feeling later. But I'm happy to finish this beer with you guys. Y'all can chat about whatever you want. Take yourselves off mute. Sing a chorus. I don't care.
What's everyone drinking?
I'm drinking an old man.
It's
sounded dirty,
it's
bro.
nearly midday.
It's
Nearly midday, so I'm
that
about
is
to go to the pub here in Australia.
That is an alt, by the way. That's the old and the old man.
Oh man, Kai Eric's going to the
Crack
pub soon.
festival, actually. So, trying to take it light on this call here was trying all sorts of stuff today. So overall, good, nice way to end the day.
Fantastic.
Yep. And I just finished up a spotted cow. So my new Glarus cup.
Hey, no way. Gotta get a fresh shipment out to you.
Oh yeah. I still got 6 left from Christmas. I'm really trying to space them out over the course of a year, probably.
You let me know. I'll send you some out.
Absolutely. I'll have to send something back.
Oh, Will and I just did a swap, and I got cabin fever sitting here for him. I'm waiting to collect a couple more, and then I'm sending some his way too.
Let me know when it's on its way, and I'll go grab some Blue Owl and send it your way. I know you're wanting to try some Blue Owl.
Yes.
Has anyone brewed up their?
That's true. Those probably
brew
walk away.
What was that, Doug? We missed you, buddy.
Has anyone else taken a shot at the average brew yet?
Mine's coming tomorrow.
Mine's about 3 days into fermentation. I pulled a sample off. Had some people over the other day, and I told them, I said, don't drink a lot of it because I can see the yeast, but you're welcome to sample it. And there's a lot of really positive response on it so far.
Fantastic.
It looks like just an old school solid APA recipe to me.
I added a half ounce of orange peel, sweet orange peel, into mine.
Oh, cool.
So mine's going to be a pale orange.
I think that's going to be the cool part, is everyone kind of adding their own twist. And when that announcement comes this week, you guys are all going to want to submit yours. It's going to be pretty dang cool.
Well, if you want to tease it to all 8 people that are here, feel free.
I was going to say there's 4 non-leadership guys here and we all know about it. So Marshall has agreed to bring in Justin and Tim and do an Average Brews episode on the podcast. So we're gonna put out a post, put out the call for people who want to send their beers in. If there's more than we're have to cap it at 10 because of course we don't want to get those guys, super drunk. So if there's more than 10, then we'll have to do some sort of lottery system to pick the 10 that'll be submitted into the show. And then if you get picked, you get to send your beer into the show, and they're going to review it live on air. They're going to drink it, and then they're going to rank it. And there's a possibility of something else happening after that. So it's going to be pretty.
Would it make sense to have us send in more than one bottle and then have a weaning down process? That way, someone who knows what they're tasting can say, okay, well, this one is oxidated. Let's make sure we get of the group that comes in, the 10 that are going to be good representations.
I think it's okay.
I would recommend that anyways, because if you send 3 in and one turns out to be oxidated shit, at least you got 2 others that could potentially be good.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I've been talking with Marshall about it. We got the go ahead to collect the names and get the whole thing started. But as far as how many bottles he wants to do, like that, I'm not sure. But that's going to be fantastic to have we're going to have a TBC, episode with this, and then another one for Average Brews. Probably, I don't know when we'll send it in. Probably in March at some point we'll send some bottles into him, and then I don't know when we'll drink them and record, but that's going to be pretty sweet.
Cool.
Yeah, just I saw your message about fucking another question, Haven. I'm sorry. I totally missed it.
No worries. I wanted to know if during any of their experiments has a contributor or Marshall himself, whether due to human error or infection or whatever, had one of their batches go south and they just couldn't, like, what did they do? Did that just go on the back of the list to get redone or what? I'd be curious. I've never heard of kind of a failed experiment.
Yeah,
they've mentioned that on their shows.
Really?
Secondary, that sometimes they'll forget to put in an ingredient, or sometimes they've had they call it the something effect. One of the contributors who has more than one occasion.
I think it's an array is what they call it.
He had another name for it too, though, where like if the brew just goes so fucking